Hey everyone, today I'm sharing an episode of the Fuel Your Legacy show with Sam Knickerbocker, in which I made a recent guest appearance. Both Sam and I thought introducing our communities would make for a more powerful tribe with a lot in common. Sam's a lot more than a podcaster. He's also a brilliant financial advisor. In fact, he and I sat down off camera for a meeting that helped me see a lot of options for saving, investing, even tax benefits I've been missing out on. I'll include a link to connect with Sam in the show notes. Before we jump in, remember to check out the new website, jimmotes.com. It'll keep you up to date on all we have going on, and it'll even provide you a link to join our building and becoming community for free. Check it out. Remember to like, share, engage, and subscribe to all the content to support the show, the mission, and the ministry. Please enjoy episode 66 of the Ministry of Freedom Show. Okay, all good.
Welcome back to the Fuel Your Legacy show. And today we have another incredible guest. Super excited to be interviewing Jim Motes. Reached out to him on Instagram, just saw what he was kind of doing, the message that he's portraying and the life that he's living, and really believed, I think that there's a spot for him on the Fuel Your Legacy show to really bring a legacy, bring importance of how we think about our lives and what is the importance of lives to the show. Jim, if you knew him personally, they say he's an unapologetic, in-your-face approach to that's what he likes to do, and he just loves Christ. He wants to follow Christ and wants to share that with other people. I think that both of those things, a lot of times, how does that work? Somebody who's in your face and kind of just unapologetically them, but also deeply focused on becoming a better person and spiritual. And that's really what I want to talk about. How do we blend these things into our lives? How do we become a whole human rather than being different people in different places? How do we be the same person everywhere we are? And a lot of times that can be scary, especially in our society. So I'm just curious, how did you develop that type of personality trait that you were going to follow Christ, be the person you are? Because you don't always just watching your social media contents and stuff. Sometimes you say some hard things, you say some hard truths that people just need to hear. And that sometimes people are like, that's not very nice of you. Well, nice maybe isn't the objective. So how do you balance that? And how did you come to that realization that you wanted to portray yourself that way?
So great question to start out with. And thank you, Sam, for having me. It's really cool to be here. I love your stuff. I love what you're doing. The thing with me is, I think to answer the question, I never knew Jesus until I was 31 years old. So my personality was somewhat brash, somewhat harsh, and somewhat in your face. And as I came to Christ, I was a little bit shocked over time that didn't soften up that much. My heart certainly changed, but my personality was still there. And I had an overwhelming feeling that, I think Jesus wants to use this personality to advance his kingdom. And I think he's going to use me to do that. Truth, I think, needs to be spoken all the time. And I try to separate truth from opinion. And I like to give facts. And the fact of the matter is, there's a lot of people that are walking around very unhealthy, metabolically sick, emotionally unhealthy, and spiritually void. And my heart won't allow me just to be okay with that. And one of the reasons that I've made some pretty significant life changes in the last year and a half is because what I was doing with my life before was very self-serving. So I'll back up and give the audience a little bit of backstory. I was in the automobile industry for 27 years. So at 24 years old, I started selling used cars. And at this point in my life, I was alcoholic, drug addict, womanizer, you name it. I was that guy. And the car business really fed all of that for me, because I found out, I'm pretty good at selling used cars. I'm not a really educated guy, but I can do this. And I started making really good money and doing bad things with that money. And I had some success in that industry. This was 1997 when I got in the car business. In 2003, I had a pretty radical spiritual transformation. Shameless plug, but my first book that I wrote is called I Asked God to Kill Me. The reason that's the title of the book is that's how all of this began with my relationship with Christ, because my first conversation I ever remember in my life having with him was, I'm staring up at my ceiling, because that's where I thought God was. And I said, I'm just done with this life. I can't do it. Please kill me. Please kill me. And spoiler alert, he didn't. But what he did was he gave me a little bit of a different life. And I knew from that minute on, something was different, because I tried to stop drinking and drugs for 100 times. but something felt different this time. I prayed the next day. I said, well, you didn't kill me. Take this compulsion away from me. I haven't had a drink or used drugs since that day. And that's almost 22 years ago. So my life changed drastically at that point. And then my impact in the auto industry grew. And I became a partner in a large auto group and built my stock value in that as the auto group grew and as my influence and impact in that grew. And I did that as a partner for about 15 years until the summer of 2023. Was tired of the self-serving nature of the whole gig. I was making really good money and every day was kind of the same. And I didn't feel like I was living. I felt like I was existing. I knew I wasn't doing anything for the kingdom and it was time to change. And that brings us to why I'm talking to you, because I'm just trying to do a whole different gig right now.
Sure, which I love. So when you say you weren't doing anything for the kingdom or building other people and it was all selfish, what made it selfish? Like what, I'm going to preface this, I guess. When I think of somebody who's successful, there's two types of people who are successful. And this is overgeneralization, but also I think everybody will be like, yeah, okay, I agree with that. There's people who are successful for themselves, and then there's people who are successful leading others to success as well. Do you feel like you just didn't lead anybody and that's why it was self-serving? Or like what made it feel self-serving to you?
What made it feel self-serving is it was so financially focused. Now, I justified that because I'm a faithful tither and have been for many, many years. And my tithing testimony is powerful. I believe in it with my whole heart. And so I was honoring God with the blessings financially that he was giving me. And I was helping a lot of other people make a lot of money, but I wasn't focused on helping them come to Jesus. And I think that those things need to be combined. I also had business partners who the last, call it 2 years of my career, I started to make the shift and I was more concerned about the person than the result. And what I found in that 2 years was the results actually started getting better in our business, but my partners weren't really okay with how I was doing that, with developing the people and caring about what they're doing outside of work and telling them some of those hard truths, grabbing the guy that's 400 pounds and unhealthy and telling him, hey, there's a better way. What if I could help you become healthier? What if we could do a plan together? My partners weren't too okay with that methodology.
What was their issue with you actually helping somebody?
The issue was that's not what we do here. Okay. They show up for work, they produce, they go home.
Did they think it was a liability or like what was the?
I think that they did see a liability factor in it. What I found was, especially since 2020, the environment changed everywhere, but especially in the corporate world. Everyone seemed to be walking on eggshells. We couldn't say this, you couldn't do this. And, we're going to get, you just brought that guy in your office and told him that he's too fat. And we're going to get sued for that. I'm like, I didn't bring the guy in and tell him he's too fat. I brought the gentleman in and said, if you're looking for a better way and you're trying to improve your health, I've been there because I used to be obese. And I used to be everything. And now I'm not. And, I was fat, I was addicted, I was broke, I was all these things. I can help you. And they didn't like any part of that.
Is it when you left that, I guess what I'm getting at is I feel like sometimes it is easier to just completely shift industries and shift everything. However, when I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Mormons, whatever you want to call us, right?
Sure.
And I was going out on my 2-year service mission. I was going to go to Scotland and Ireland. That's where I went. It was awesome. Loved every part of it. Before I went, though, I was talking to somebody, and they're like, man, how can you go and teach about something that maybe you don't fully believe everything that is believed in this religion? How could you go talk about that? And how do you keep going every week if you have doubts? How do you keep going if you're not sure about these things? Or maybe not even doubts, like maybe you actually believe something that's different than what the general population of the church you're going to believes. Like, how do you keep going? And for me, I say, okay, well, you could go and try and start your own church. You can go try and start your own belief system that's like 99% or probably 90% the same, but 10% different. But because that 10%, I should go start my own thing. Or you can say, look, there's a room of people here that I think if they actually were exposed to new ideas, they would probably believe the way I believe it. So do you go to the hospital where all the sick people are for analogy's sake? Do you go to the hospital where all the sick people are to help them? Or do you go try and start your own healthy place center that there's no sick people and just hope that healthy people show up to you? Sometimes in business, we think, oh, it's not working. I'm going to go start my entire new thing, rather than creating the culture or shifting the culture to be a healthier culture. Now, it sounds like your business partners didn't necessarily want you to shift their culture for whatever reason.
Yeah.
But I do think that in corporate America, there's still plenty of space for that type of environment that says, no, oh my gosh, airplane mode. Phone calls, it's not good. So that's kind of an interesting thing. What could you have done more to stay in the environment, or to maybe use those decades of experience in car sales or things to just start a new environment using the same skill set you already have, but starting in a new, more Christ-centered culture inside of that environment where they all want that when they sign up for it?
So I think that's another great question. I'll preface this. The issues I had with my business partners were pretty deep-seated in the last few years that I was there. So I don't know that there was any real coming back from some of the issues that I had with these guys. And a lot of it was some nepotistic issues, some nepotism things. There were some younger sons coming up in the mix, and situations to where, I butted heads with these guys. I've been around for 20 years. This guy's, 20 years younger than me. And now he wants to, those types of things. And I certainly, in any relationship, when it goes sour, there's no one side that's to blame. So
Sure.
I would say that I'm glad that I'm not in that field anymore, and not just with those partners. And I wouldn't be where I'm at without the opportunities I was given from this group. So I certainly have a debt of gratitude to this family, because it was a family auto group. These are solid people, and I just think that our relationship went to a place where it wasn't going to work regardless. Now, what I will say is I was very, very passionate and fired up, not about selling cars and financing cars and those types of things, but I came to work every day and I found, what's really firing me up is the people that I feel I'm making an impact with. I feel that, there were even clients that would come in and I know they're having issues or whatever. I'd ask to pray for these people. I'm laying hands on clients in the sales manager office and praying over people. And I don't know how kosher that is. I didn't care. Like, that's what God's put in my heart. I'm fired up. And I was really there was a handful of staff team members that I was like, I really feel like I'm making an impact in some of these lives. That's what fired me up. And the timing of everything ended up working out to where, I can see that long-term, this isn't going to work out. Maybe it's just time to separate from this situation, cash out my stock and figure out the next phase of life. And I knew that phase of life was, I wanted to have what I call a ministry. So I have a podcast as well. It's called the Ministry of Freedom Show. The reason that I call it Ministry of Freedom is, here's my view on freedom. And I think a lot of the things I do kind of blur the line. I'm certainly not a religious guy at all, but I love Jesus Christ with all my heart. And he's the center of my entire life. And my testimony is very powerful. I think religion gets in the way a lot. So freedom to me means a lot of different things, but primarily freedom is building a foundational faith in Christ and becoming strong, fit, and capable in all areas. And so what I'm about is helping people on both sides of that. And when you talk about building legacy, those two things I think are a must to build lasting, true legacy. I think they're huge. I'll speak to legacy when I was checking out your stuff, and I love your show, the word legacy really speaks to me. And I'll tell you, I thought you'd find this interesting. When I was a kid, probably early teenager, I remember my dad sitting me down and telling me, Jim, me, my grandpa, my great grandpa, all my brothers, we're all drunks. That's who we are. That's our family. And that's probably what you're going to be. And guess what? He was right. And then when I had that moment, when I asked God to kill me, I remember having a revelation of, this stops now. I'm done with that. When I think about generational curses and things, because even the scripture speaks of generational curses, I think a lot of that is generational decisions and habits.
Absolutely.
We can change that, because you know what? My family, we're not alcoholics. We're not drunks. I don't buy any of that. I tell you, people ask me all the time, do you go to AA and, you consider yourself an alcoholic? And first off, I'm not bashing AA. AA's helped millions of people, but I don't go. I have gone a couple times, and I tell you why I don't go anymore. This speaks to identity and generational curse. Every time you go to a 12-step meeting, you raise your hand and you say, I'm Jim, I'm an alcoholic, or I'm Jim, alcoholic, drug addict. And got to a point where I was lying to him because I'm not that. The Bible tells me I'm a new creation in Jesus Christ. I'm not an alcoholic anymore. I'm not operating in that every day, waking up every day with that shame and that stench on me. That's not who I am anymore. I'm redeemed. I'm covered in, I'm righteous because of the blood of Christ and what happened at the cross. I'm not going to identify like that. And when I refuse to identify, they're like, bro, we appreciate you being here and you got a good story, but man, it's not going to work. Okay, no problem. I'll go a different route. But so I don't rely on that anymore. And I don't believe in white knuckling my way through life with, I just don't want to drink today. I don't want to be a sober guy. I want to be a free guy. Those are two different things.
Yeah, I think that's huge. I studied neuropsychology in college. And then moved into a different industry when I got into my profession. But what I find, I have the same issue with the 12-step program. And it's not that they haven't helped people, and everybody needs that at some point. So, like your definition, I want you to say it again because it didn't go slow enough for me to fully, but your definition of freedom, there was two parts to it. What's your definition of freedom, real quick? It was about something about Christ and then becoming capable.
So freedom is building a foundational faith in Jesus Christ. And that's the important part. And becoming strong, fit, and capable in all areas of life. That's my belief. And when I say all areas of life, that's relationally, physically, financially. I think people, especially in the church, sometimes we don't want to talk about that other than the tithing talks and, the giving speeches at church. We don't want to talk about financial responsibility. That's one thing I do respect about the LDS church, and not that there's only one thing.
Sure.
I have a lot of Mormon friends.
That's okay. If it's only one, that's cool.
But I'll tell you this: I love how, first off, their tithing testimony is great. I mean, Mormon people are about the tithe. I think even more so than maybe the evangelical quote unquote community.
I would argue to different perspectives though, because we actually, my sister, so I'm the seventh of 11 kids, and half of us have kind of stayed in the LDS church, and some of us have gone to other faiths, or just, unfortunately, some just not lost all their faith, which just happens. But we just went, she had her baby blessing, and we went to their church, and they're doing it. It was basically all about tithing. It was phenomenal. The way it's portrayed in the LDS faith versus some of the other more mainline Christian faiths is different. They tie the act of giving to completely different emotions, to completely different purposes, which I find fascinating. I still don't know why people don't just, I don't know. I have my own thing with tithing, but it is funny. The way Jesus taught it, if you read the script like Malachi and you're actually reading what's
that's where I was going to go, Malachi. Yeah.
Well, if you actually read Malachi, Jesus Christ really brings up tithing as a rebuttal to something far deeper. And the deeper concept is in the 2 or 3, where are the verses? I'll just pull up the scriptures. I'm changing the way I do my podcast, and it lends to, we get to actually just pull stuff up now.
Love it, man. Let's go.
No, I want it to be more of this conversation here. So where's Malachi?
While you're searching for that, let me just interject this in regards to Malachi. I love what got me was when I was taught in a sermon one day that it's the only place in the scripture where God says, go ahead and test me in this. And I thought, okay, I'm just going to test it. And boy, my faith got legs, man, when I started putting my finances where my heart is.
Yeah, it really. So this is the crucial thing about tithing, I believe. So the first part of Malachi, so verses like 1 through, and again, this is the King James Version for those of you who are like, mine says something different. They all say something a little different. Okay, so the first thing is he's talking about, hey, we're going to send messengers, and then it says they need to come to the temple. Okay, why do we need to go to the temple? Because it's like the refiners, we're refining things. And it's not about going to the temple to offer tithes. It's about going to the temple to protect yourself. And then it says, well, even from the days of your fathers, you're all gone away. So this is the new paragraph, new sentence structure. This is right before we talk about tithing. It says, you've all gone away from mine ordinances, and ye have not kept them. Return to me, and I will return to you, saith the Lord of hosts. But ye say, wherein shall ye return? So the response of tithing, the reason we pay tithing, all of these things, it's not the act of transferring money. If you pay tithing, but you never return to fulfill the ordinance.
Yep.
You never return to the church. You're just, I'm a tithe payer. I pay from a distance. But you're not going to the temple, or in the LDS faith, the temple. But you guys have, like, every church has a different, what their building of religiosity is. But the whole concept is, if you say you aren't able to perform ordinances, if you say you aren't able to commune with God, why? Why do you not have a place of sanctity? You don't have a place of sanctity because you didn't build one. Yeah. So you need to go put the financial resources, or the cows, the sheep, whatever you need to do. You need to put the resources in as a community to build a place of sanctuary so that you can have your communion with God. And so just saying, well, there's no temple here. We moved to a new town and there's no place of sanctuary, so that's why we stopped praying. There was no altar. Sorry, God, that's why we stopped offering. It's like, wait a second. It's your job to build the altar.
That's right. That's a good word, man.
The tithing is the act of building the altar. It's not, and it's for the purpose of building the altar. If all you ever did was build an altar, said that's a great altar, and you moved on and you never used the altar, then it values you nothing. It's profiting you absolutely nothing. So then when they're like, oh, well, God's going to open the windows of heaven and pour out all these blessings and rebuke the devourer and all these blessings, those blessings are not correlated to tithing. Those blessings are correlated to performing the ordinances inside the place of sanctuary. The tithing is merely a means. This is why I named my podcast Fuel Your Legacy. Not, this isn't the only reason, but it's a deeper reason than just the title. Fuel Your Legacy is the money, the finance, as you found in your career, right? It's not the main thing. It's not even the fulfilling thing.
That's right.
But without it, it's very difficult to eat healthy. It's very difficult to have the time and space and resources to perfect your temple if you don't have
exactly
the
right.
taken care of. So it's like this, too often in Christianity on both sides, they focus more on the act of the money transferring, which is why mega churches get some flack for having too much
private jets and the whole
whatever. Yeah. But the point is, it's like, if you're not finalizing the thing by actually participating in the ritual, it didn't benefit you.
That's right.
I think there's a disconnect, and I think in all of Christianity that could be tied closer together. But I don't know why they don't ever teach that part. It's like, why teach about the ordinances? Let's just teach about give me money.
Yeah.
Wait a second.
Yeah, there's a lot of the stuff that that's not the most comfortable part to teach. It's like, hey, if you give money, good stuff's going to happen to you. And that's why we have to be very careful about that prosperity gospel.
It also doesn't require any human to change. They are allowed to be this person, just as you said, hey, well, I'm allowed to keep doing this because I tithe.
Yeah.
But once you realize, wait a second, I want to become a different person. Yes. I don't want to just fund the process of change for other people. I want to change. Christ meant something to me, not just for other people. I actually believe Christ, not just believe in Christ. Yeah. And that changes that conversation entirely.
It does. That's a really strong point and a great word. The transformation is what it's about, right? It's the Romans 12:2 part of the scripture. You have to be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And as that heart and mind transformation happens, your wants change. And that's where the freedom happens, right? People ask me all the time, so Jim, you can never have a beer if you want? I said, sure I can. I can do anything I want. I choose not to, but of course I can. I'm a free person in the United States of America, and I'm blessed to have a little bit of net worth and some opportunity, and I've got a car and a passport, and I can go do anything I want to do. I choose to live a life that's pointed this way because I'm changed. So the person that says, I can never have a beer, that person's trying to be sober. The person who says, I can have all the beer I want, but after 22 years still hasn't had one, is free. So I try to help people achieve freedom because that's what lasts. And that's where the joy is. And it's not just with alcohol and drugs, but that's a big part of it. I've also found that I've unlocked a lot of life by becoming healthier. I remember walking around I'm not a huge guy. I'm a 165-pound guy, but I used to be a 240-pound guy. And I was really fat, and I smoked 3 packs of cigarettes every day and drank 18 beers every day and snorted lines of cocaine every day. And I felt really bad in my late 20s. I couldn't walk up a flight of steps without almost dying. So I know what that feels like, and there's no freedom in that. And I've expressed to people, because I'm all about the freedom aspect of life, and I tell the 400-pound guys that I'm trying to to disciple, I love you. Jesus loves you, but you're not experiencing the freedom and the life that I believe he desires for you to live in this physical state. Now, this isn't a God's going to love you more if you're in shape. That's not true. It's not a salvation issue. You believe in Christ, you're going to heaven. That's not the issues I'm talking about. I'm trying to help people have a more free, meaningful, effective life down here. There's so many people that are, and I felt this this is one of the reasons I changed my life at 52 years old is from a career perspective. I was living, or I was existing. Now I'm living.
Mm-hmm.
Existing and living are different things. And I think that we have to, as followers of Christ, because I'm a big discipleship guy, that's what we're supposed to do, go and make disciples. I think we need to speak those truths, and we need to be willing at the coffee shop to say the things that perhaps the pastors and bishops are unwilling to say on Sunday.
Yeah, I agree completely. I want to go back into your story when you first asked for God to kill you, and I haven't read your whole book, so I don't know all the details here. But I want to tie it into this concept because I think a lot of times you said in your rendition of that God didn't kill you, you're still here. And what I really think is fascinating is, again, just studying the way human bodies work. Our bodies are completely, entirely, every cell is new. The longest cell is about 15 years in your femur, but most of them are new within months. Like every cell is new. And so the 27-year-old Jim that did all those things, he's literally been dead. Those cells have been dead for decades at this point.
That's right.
Okay. The question is, will you allow yourself to die? Or do you keep re-bringing yourself back up as part of you? And so when we ask God, will you kill me? That's actually a very real, healthy response. Like, hey, there's parts of me that I don't identify with anymore, and I want to cut out of my life. There's aspects of who I have become that I want to remove from my future existence and my current existence. And if God can turn leprosy into heal, then he can do the same for you. Wow. He killed the dead cells. He killed those cells, and he allowed new cells to be put in their place. And so I would argue that he did kill you.
Wow.
And that's a good thing.
Yes.
I'm not promoting suicide, ending in all termination of living and breathing. But there's absolutely, when somebody's suicidal, it's not as much, sometimes it's a mental illness. I'm not saying it's not, but a lot of times there's elements of their life that they want to die. They want to go be put to bed and to rest. Yes. And they misinterpret that as saying that the being needs to die rather than the habit, rather than the experience. And so death, I think, is really important. And so that's one of the things I wrote down here is, when somebody asks themselves that, who needs to die? When you ask yourself to die or ask yourself to be killed, who is it that needs to die? And this brings up another question here. Have you ever watched the movie The Host?
No.
It's a pretty interesting movie.
I'm writing it down, man.
Okay. There's a book. The book is it's the same author, I think, who wrote Twilight.
Okay.
So you can understand she has some interesting perspectives, got an imagination on her.
Yeah.
But the idea of The Host is that there are these, in the movie, they almost look like jellyfish. Okay. And they're alien organisms, for lack of a better word, that when they arrive on a planet, they get inside of your brain and they take control of your brain. And for every person we're going to call them asleep or a sheeple or, just followers, their mind is really easy to take over. And so then the host exists inside that body until that body dies, and then it goes to a new host. The organism goes to a new host. But these organisms, they never die. These are like your generational traumas that just never die. They're there for eons, generations, thousands of years, these same fears, traumas, living small, things that we're not doing. And because that host or the organism is stronger than the host's mind, then it doesn't work. But for the people who have a stronger mind, then they appear schizophrenic because they're always arguing with themselves.
I see.
So then this becomes an ethical, like, do you save the train of people or the person on the track? So this becomes an ethical dilemma in the movie because the strong-minded people, they figured out a way to extract the host out of somebody and to kill the host, to kill the organism, pull it out of the host and kill the organism, and quote unquote liberate this person. What's fascinating though is that organism is also something that's been living for a really long time. And so do you medicate quote unquote, and sedate the mind of the actual host, or and allow the organism to populate, or do you pull that organism out, which is its own set of traumas, humans, whatever, or organism, its own sense of being, and do you kill that? So like, what do you want to kill? What do you want to, anyways, you got to watch the whole movie to fully
for sure
comprehend it. But I think in your experience of having gone through the please kill me and seeing what's gone on, I think it'll have an extra different sense of poignance to you and your experience,
for sure.
And maybe just give you another paradigm to view your life through.
For sure.
Probably not change it wildly, but I just think it is an ethical dilemma, and some people are better with the hosts, but some of those hosts, some of those habits, this is what kind of at the end of the movie, some of the organisms that had lived for centuries in the movie, they wanted to die. They weren't able to die unless they were killed. And so sometimes, generation after generation, we're alcoholics. And then maybe it's time that habit wanted to die, and it finally got into the mind of somebody who had a strong enough mind to control it and say, I will lovingly pull you out of our generational line and put you to rest. I'm going to put alcoholism lovingly down.
Yeah.
I'm not going to murder it. I'm not going to hate it. I'm not going to fight against alcoholism. I'm going to understand it was a part of my past. It was a part of my family line. I'm grateful for everything it did to help us get to where we are. And I'm lovingly going to set this habit aside and say, you've performed your duties, moving on.
That is amazing. I want to share something about my dad, because that's what you discussed in that is what made me think of the generational stuff. So I told you my dad, when I was an early teenager, told me that story. And my dad was an alcoholic. That is until about the last 5 years of his life. So he passed away in 2008. And in 2003 is when I had my radical encounter with Jesus. I remember talking to my dad about a week later and saying, hey, I'm done drinking, and I'm trying to find out who this Jesus is and what's this about, maybe find a church and stuff. And my dad's like, I don't want to hear any of this, and I'm not going to have a Jesus freak for a son. And if that's where you're going, I don't need you. And I thought, ooh, that hurts, because this is my drinking buddy. And this is my dad, who's kind of my best friend. And I look up to him, and he's my hero and all these things. And right then I thought, well, maybe, this is kind of nonsense. And if my dad thinks it's crazy, then it's probably crazy. Something in me kept persevering. And I wasn't beating him over the head with me not drinking or with the Bible or anything, but I was living a different life, and he's watching it happen. And shortly after that, he gets diagnosed with cancer, and it was very advanced lung cancer. So, that changes a guy, but he didn't, quit drinking and quit smoking right away. None of that. But you could tell he was a little bit receptive. He came to visit because he lived in Illinois at the time, and I'm here in Omaha, Nebraska. So he made the trip, and he visited me for a week. And I said, come to church with me. He's like, no, man. I mean, I'm okay with you not drinking. I won't drink in your house, but I'm not going to church. I said, give it a try. Come to church with me. So I talked him into going to church, and we were sitting at the very back so we could bolt if we needed to in case he's not liking it. We're sitting at the very back, and the pastor is in the middle of a sermon and stops. And this doesn't happen too often. It's a pretty big church. It's pretty regimented, and here's the program for the day and everything. So the pastor stops and he says, we're going to interrupt for just a minute. He goes, and he says, I don't normally do this kind of thing, but the Spirit's really speaking to me today. I think there's a guest or multiple guests perhaps that are here that are battling cancer. And I'm going to give 1, 2, however many people, if that's you, an opportunity to come down front and get prayed for. Now, at this point, my dad had been given about 6 months to live. It's pretty advanced. I looked over at him, and he's like, no, we're not going down. I said, bro, he's speaking to you. So we walked down to the front, as did maybe 1 or 2 other people. Now, there's 1,500 people in the place. So about 3 of us are down front with our loved ones. And this person prayed over my dad, put her hand on his chest. And I mean, it gives me goosebumps to tell this story, and is praying for healing and things. And we go back up, sit down. And a couple days later, dad goes back home, and he doesn't say much about it until he goes to his next doctor's appointment. And this is where it gets a little bit interesting because, he's miraculously healed. No, he wasn't. But the doctor didn't give him great news even after getting prayed for. Jim, we're going to stick with kind of the initial diagnosis here, and it's looking like a matter of months, and we're not going to beat you up with a bunch of chemo and stuff because it's just going to cause a lot of pain. And fast forward to 5 years later, my dad was still around, and his cancer got no worse, not a ton better, but he was able to manage. then decided, he and his doctor, after being around a year when he only had 6 months to live, we're going to try a few treatments. So he did some treatments, cleared up some cancer. He ended up living for 5 more years after that Sunday we were at church, and ended up stopping alcohol, quit smoking. And I would say a year after that church service allowed me to pray a prayer of salvation with him, gave his life to Jesus Christ. And this guy who told me when I was a kid that we're always going to be alcoholics and that's the way it is, turned his life around, received prayer, and made an impact on a lot of lives for the final 5 years of his life. And now when I'm done down here, when I go see Jesus, I'm going to see my dad too. And that's how generational curses are broken, by somebody having the courage. Like me, I had the courage from the Holy Spirit to persevere in my sobriety journey and to stand strong and invite my dad to church when it's uncomfortable for me to do that, and to pray with him and to continue. Every single day I would pray for him, and that stuff matters. And that's how legacies are built. Our family legacy is totally different than it would have been. And
and it changes both generations, both the future generation and the previous generation. Like children have and that's there's that scripture in the Bible as well, where it's like, yeah, the sins of the parents are answered on their children's heads. That's the negative effects, but also it's about the children helping their fathers return to Christ. Like that's actually part of the scriptures as well. So it's like, it's up to the children to resolve these concerns or these habits, these behaviors, and drive the family closer to God. And if we all do that systematically, right, if we could get every generation to be resolving more and more and more and more concerns. Have you ever studied much of, I know this is going to go super left field, and you're like, no, I don't do that. But have you ever studied Scientology at all?
So just from the stuff I've seen on the Netflix specials and that type of stuff, but the studying it, no, I haven't read Dianetics. I'm fascinated by who Hubbard was, and that whole thing, but not to the depth that I think you're going to.
So when we, growing up, my mom was struggling with her faith a lot. I didn't know this until, after, but we were regularly studying other religions, and we would go into these different congregations, participate in their services, interview the pastors, write papers about, like, we were not just the current day, but like studying the history. How did these places how did these religions get to where they are? Anyways, so I got a very broad knowledge of a lot of different religions. So if I were to ever write a book, or when I write a book, it'll just like your book is I Asked God to Kill Me, my book would be something in context of like the concepts of Christ, or the concept of Christ. Regardless of whether you believe in the sound Christ or the word, how it's written, Christ, the concept of Christ is universally taught. The concept of the separation of negative energy, shame, guilt, sorrow, all those things, the invitation to exist in light, love, joy, happiness, that concept is everywhere. The division of positive and negative energy and emotion, and the invitation with the division to exist in a higher state of mind, that's a truism that's across every religion, every creed, every belief system, from the atheism all the way into like the deeply religious sects. Yeah. So that's the concept of Christ. Christianity, we use the word Christ to define that concept. In other religious belief systems or theologies, they use different sounds to symbolize or share that same concept. And so something that I feel is like a life calling of mine is to help people understand that transition, and what is the concept, not to get rid of the concept just because you are offended by Christ for whatever reason. You can still accept the concept. Don't stop progressing. So where does that all get to Scientology? In Scientology, there's two sides of our human existence. There's a very spiritual side, and the spiritual side is heavily impacted by our physical beings. And our beings are made up of energy. That's all it is. Proton, neutron, nucleus, lots of those. And that's our body, same as everything else, right? So we actually are directly connected to everything else in our universe. It looks like we have a hand and air, but really the air and the hand are the same proton, nucleus, and neutron vibrating at different frequencies, but they're all continuously conjoined, right? There's space in between all of the matter, and it's all one. It just looks different based on the frequency of the vibration. Well, Scientology, his version of this was, we all have lived multiple lives, eons, and different things. Like, he believes in reincarnation in a whole another level past like Asian history. It's like 12,000 years ago on planet Zerg or whatever, like just crazy.
Yeah.
He created his own universe, but he's trying to describe his experience. He's probably on some type of psychedelics. He's trying to describe this experience. And so he's like, hey, we've lived all these different lives. And the idea of going clear, which is their form of repentance, which I have my own commentary on whether I believe it's really real repentance or not. But point is, you're holding metal rods, essentially, and they're asking you questions. And electricity is going through these rods. And they're asking questions to see if you have any literal resistance to the question. And if they detect, because it's just an electrometer, just like if you get on a scale to determine what's your body fat percentage, it's the same process. We're all scientists, right? Or Scientologists, right? Determining what's your body fat percentage. It's the exact same process, only on my scale, it spits out a number that says you're 25% or you're 10% or you're whatever. That's all that's happening based on how much water you have in your body and how much resistance there was. Well, that's Scientology, and it's at its core is you're doing this and you have to pay for these sessions. So that's the money-making aspect of the church. Yep. But they're testing your resistance to a question. And based on your resistance, so if I asked you, hey, do you struggle with your relationship with your spouse? And you're like, no, my relationship with my spouse is really, really great. And there's zero hesitation, then it's probably not going to move the needle much. But if you're like, yeah, we just got in an argument this morning, then it's going to be like resistance. And so then they're going to say, okay, well, what about that? How do we help you release any form of shame, guilt, sorrow, anything from that experience? What do you need to get off your chest? What do you need to talk about to release that negative energy and move forward in happiness? And so that's the process of going clear. And the more lives you can clear, the better. Like the more, but when you think about the lives, you still were born on one day and you're going to die on one day. So what type of trauma are you clearing 6 generations ago or 6 lives ago?
Yeah. Okay.
We have the ability to, through DNA sequencing, when one person has a baby, they share their DNA. Well, that electrical magnetic frequency that was transferred had been disrupted due to previous traumas. And so when that comes into our life, we're actually living a disrupted, less than perfect helix of DNA strand. And we have the ability as God beings and children of God to heal or put back into proper order and frequency our DNA. And so every generation, one person may only get to a certain aspect of healing on that DNA strand. And then the next person gets, unfortunately, a new DNA strand, and they get to work on things from both sides. So it's really interesting. Not that I believe in Scientology. That's not what I'm saying. But I think most religious beliefs, they are all an attempt to describe the human experience. And so I think there's truth in all of it. Maybe not all of it is truth, but there's truth in all of it.
That's great, man. You said healing the DNA. Boy, I'm going to think on that. I love that. Healing the DNA, because I'm a healing guy. I believe in it. I believe that, there's healing we all need to do, but healing the DNA. That's good, man.
Yeah. Well, let's go. So I'm curious about your family life. Like you went 50 years. Did you have other siblings that didn't necessarily break free from that? Or were you a single child? Like what was that family pressure like?
So I was an only child in my household. I do have a half brother and a half sister that weren't part of our household. So I was raised as the only child in the household. My mother, never an issue with alcohol at all. I grew up an Army brat. My dad was a 2-tour Vietnam veteran, decorated Bronze Star, ended up retiring from the Army. So that was an interesting upbringing. We traveled a bunch, and my childhood was, it was good. At 12 years old, we relocated from Clearwater, Florida, and moved up to a small town in Iowa. And because that's where my dad's family was from. And it went a little bit off the rails there because dad was kind of back at his roots and other family members up there and stuff. And it started going a little bit, the good old boys return home type of a situation. So I write about these stories in the book a little bit too. At 16 years old, so I'll give you a little childhood background. And I love my mom to death. I just want to say that she's the most genuine that biggest hearted person I've ever known, best hearted person. But the story I'm going to tell isn't going to paint her in that great a light for this season of life. Came home from school one day. I was a junior in high school. Every year, my dad took a 2-week motorcycle trip in the spring, and he and his buddies would go, Mexico or wherever on a motorcycle trip. He's gone a couple weeks. This is before the age of cell phones and stuff. Keep in mind, so he wasn't very easy to reach, which is going to be important for the next part of the story. Come home from school one day. I'm a junior in high school, and my mom is obviously frazzled and in a hurry. And I'm like, what the heck's going on? She's got most of her belongings packed in our car. Turns out she's packed everything up and she's bailing. She's leaving. And I said, and I didn't know there was problems in our home. I was that naive of a kid. I'm like, what? I thought we had a pretty good household here. What's going on? Excuse me. So she says, I don't want to do this family thing anymore. And I'm moving to California and see you later. She had all of her stuff packed we had a brand new car. And I said, well, that's not going to work. You're going to pull all your stuff out of the new car, move it over into the older car, and then you can take off. So I stood there. I'll never forget this. I stood there and I watched her move all of her stuff over into the other car. I didn't say a word to her. I wasn't yelling and screaming. No, nothing. I didn't really know what to feel. I remember watching her drive down the street, out of the driveway and down the street, going back in the house. And I'm like, well, this is weird because, my dad's gone for the next 2 weeks. Here I am alone. And what the heck do you do with life at that point? So my dad calls a couple days later. Hey, let me talk to mom. She's not here. And, I don't want to freak him out while he's on his trip. I remember when he came back home, I hear his motorcycle pulling up the driveway and he comes in the house and he says, hey, bud. And I said, hey, Dad. He says, hey, where's your mom? I'll never forget these words. I looked at Dad and I said, she left you, dude. He says, what? I said, she left you, dude. I repeated it. And our relationship then was just crazy because we were both just started drinking off the rails. He essentially moves out of the house, moves down to Omaha with another woman, leaves me in our home while I'm in high school. I see him every couple weeks. He would come back home. He left me his checkbook to buy groceries and pay the bills. I'm 16 years old and living like an adult. And so I grew up pretty fast. And at 17 years old, he always joked with me. He says, you know what I'm going to get you for graduation is I'm going to get you a set of luggage so you can pack everything up and get out of the house. And sure enough, for my high school graduation, he bought me a set of luggage and he said, you have 48 hours to pack your shit, pardon my French, and get out of my house. And so at 17 years old, I had my luggage and I packed all my stuff in that luggage and put it in my junky little car, and I had no job and I figured life out. And I haven't lived at home since. So yeah, it wasn't ideal. And diving into drugs and alcohol just seemed pretty natural. And I just toiled around for, did odd jobs and worked some construction and some things like that. I did go to college for 4 years, got 0 degrees and drank my way through that, and then found the car business and then was off and rolling. So my childhood was interesting.
Yeah. It sounds interesting. And when you were entering, or you mentioned earlier in your story that you kind of went through this cycle of being a womanizer and just kind of playing around with your life rather than being serious. At what point did you decide that you wanted to have a more committed, real relationship and started moving in the direction to become somebody that would fit into that?
Well, I was living with a woman when I got sober, and she was somewhat on board with the new lifestyle, but she was a drinker and things as well. But she supported me in that decision. And what I thought was, okay, so I'm not drinking and using drugs anymore, and I'm living with this woman. The next step is I've got to marry this woman. And so I did that. So I got married, and I was actually married to her for 19 years, and we divorced. I will, one of the things I'm very careful of is I never want to disparage my ex-wife, because everything that goes bad is two people. And anybody that you've built a life with for that long, there were some good times in there. But towards the end of that relationship, some alcohol stuff did start to pop back up, and I couldn't live with it. I can't have that in my life. And so that was a very difficult decision to leave that marriage. And, from a Christian perspective, one of the things I struggled with the most was I dealt with a lot of shame and a lot of guilt, because I felt maybe I felt is the wrong word. I think it's true that I broke my word to God. And that was really tough for me, because you're standing there at the altar, and those words, those vows meant something to me. And it's not just I'm looking at this woman and saying, I promise this and sickness and health and all that, but I gave my word to God that this is my spouse and this is who I'm going to be with till I die. And I broke that word. And my entire life, my dad taught me this from the time I was a little boy. We don't break our word. We didn't grow up with Christ in our home or anything, but there was that man code I was taught, and your word is gold. And if you shake your hand, that's what it means. And you don't even need a contract because your word is bond. And so I struggled with that for quite a while. And, Jesus died to forgive everything that we've done and everything we're going to do. And I think that there's a lot of people that are divorced that are Christ following people that struggle with some shame. And there is no condemnation for us when we're in Christ. And I don't think divorce is something that people should be excited to do. And hey, God's okay with me getting divorced, because I know God hates divorce. But there's a place of forgiveness and grace and mercy. And I will tell you that receiving that from Jesus has allowed me to extend it to people in my life in ways that I wasn't able to do before I felt it. And I am a brash kind of a guy and an in your face kind of a guy. And I needed to be humbled by how that felt to really need that mercy and grace from the Lord before I was able to extend it to other people. So although I'm still pretty brash and still in your face, I have realized that if it's not coming from a place of love, then it's just me. But if it's coming from a place of love with mercy, grace, and forgiveness and showing them Jesus, then I'm doing it the right way.
Yeah, I think that that's crucial. I wanted to circle back to this part of the conversation. Really, it hinges on a lot of what we talked about thus far. And that's one of the reasons I was so excited to chat with you. Just from watching your content that you do share and your belief system, I knew we'd have an engaging, full conversation. This idea of when you had mentioned, and kind of how I introduced you, how do you marry this brashness with being a Christ follower? When you had your transformational experience, your first one, now probably your second one as well, and I don't know that there's ever an end to this. Anytime we're struggling, so I was raised with two things that I learned. One I learned from my dad, and the other I learned from a song called The Noise by, I believe it's Paul Cardell. There's only like a few words in this song. I don't know if that's true, actually, but that's a different lesson. So there's a few axioms I live my life by. I'll share all three.
All right,
I don't know where I learned this other one. But my dad, on my door, I always had this quote on my door. It came from my brother, but my brother said that my dad told it to him. So I say it's from my dad. It was on orange paper, and it said, "It's better to be trusted than loved." So that's like just a belief that I have, that I chose to ingrain in my life. I'd rather be trusted than loved. If I have to choose between the two, I'd like to be loved. Okay, don't get me wrong. I want to be loved just like as much as anybody else.
Yeah.
But if I have to choose between them, I'd rather be honest and trusted than just say what you want to hear so that you like me. Not interested in that.
Yeah.
I'd rather be trusted than loved. The other one that's in this song by The Noise is there's three types of people in the world. The ones that watch things happen. Sorry, the ones that make things happen, the ones that watch things happen, and then the ones that say what happened. Okay, which are you going to be? Are you going to be the person who makes things happen? Are you going to be the person who just watches things happen? Or are you going to be the person who like wakes up on days and like, what the heck just happened? Yeah. Okay, that's important. Like, who do you want to be as a person? What level of engagement do you want to have on life?
Yeah.
Right? You talked about that in your journey of health. Like, I'm more capable now.
Yeah.
I can become an actor rather than a watcher, and a watcher rather than a what the heck just happened. Always behind. Okay.
That's
like,
right.
These are life skills, and it's an orientation about who do you want to be in your mind. So for me, that was important. The other one is there's two types of people in this world. I really don't know where this quote came from. Now I'm biting my tongue. But there's only two types of people in the world: the ones you love and the ones you don't know. And that applies to you. So many people, they don't love themselves because they don't know themselves.
Wow.
And for you, there's levels of you that you didn't know until you go through a divorce. There's levels of, you know what? Even all the time I thought this, if I was this person, I would judge this divorce. I would judge somebody who's gone through this. I would think there was more that you could do. Whatever. There's all these thoughts and feelings. But once you know it yourself and you go through it, you unlock another level of compassion. And when I see Christ, I view him as compassionate. I view him as somebody who knew himself, his faults, knew everything else so well, and in turn has an overwhelming sense of compassion for me as well, understanding that I'm not perfect. When I was dating my wife, which we're 8 years in, 9 years, almost 8 years, March of 2025 will be 9 years. And it's not long enough in my mind. Like, I love being married. But when we were dating, on our first date, she asked me, like, well, what are you looking for in a spouse? Like, what do you some people have their things that they want their spouse to be or be not be. For you, maybe you want somebody who's like not going to drink versus other things, right? Yeah. For me, it's like, look, I'm not looking for a list of things that I want somebody else to be necessarily. What I am looking for is somebody who can put up with me, because it's a big chore. I know I'm not perfect. And if you're half as screwed up as I am, then we both got a lot of compassion that we're going to need for each other through this. So I don't expect you to be perfect. The other thing, though, that I was looking for was you have to, if you're expecting me to be the same person that you married in 10 years or in 20 years or in 30 years from now, the only thing I know is that I won't be.
Yeah.
It's the only thing I know. I don't know who I'm going to become. My goal is to become like Jesus Christ. That's my goal. But I have no idea the path that's going to take me to get there or who I'm going to become in the process. But I do know that if you are marrying me for me, then in about 5 years, you're going to be really disappointed because I will no longer be the same me.
That's anymore. It. Yeah. Yes.
And so like, those are like orientations that I have. Like, man, I need to find somebody who's accepting of who I am. And that's going to provide the most joy and peace in my life, and accepting of the fact that I want to change. And I wanted to be married to somebody who also wanted to change, also wanted to become.
Yeah, I think that's important. So people are going to change. Nobody's going to stay the same. So without Christ at the center, that change is going to become so polarizing, I think. Well, we just grew apart. How many times have you heard that? That's the thing. So the idea is people should change and should evolve, but they shouldn't grow apart because the magnet is the cross. So they're still close, but different. So they can change and evolve and be different, but that closeness remains there because of the cross. And I wish I had that on my head and heart 15 years ago. I didn't come to that realization until fairly recently so the next go around is going to be a different story for me because everything has to be Christ centered or it's just not going to work. Any relationship. I believe that, the scripture that talks about not being yoked with unbelievers. I think that's very important. It doesn't mean, well, you can't have any non-Christian friends. I mean, I'm not that guy, but I do believe that serious relationships, business relationships, certainly marriage, really close friendships, I think that yoking, I think it's important that we have the cross as a commonality there.
Yeah, some belief in self and compassion. And as you've moved into your children, do you have children? I guess I didn't.
So I don't have any children. I'm engaged. My fiance has a 9-year-old girl who I love dearly. So at 53 years old, I am going to have a 9-year-old in my life every day. We're getting married later this year, and that's going to be interesting for me. Thank you. So, I'm super happy. I love her to death.
In that interaction, what have you seen or noticed about yourself as far as there's one thing to kind of learn these lessons for yourself. There's a whole nother realm trying to share this knowledge with the next generation, specifically a younger generation. An older generation, this sounds funny, like somebody in their over 20, you can have a conversation, intellectual conversation with them. They may not agree with you. They may be more difficult to persuade, but at least they can understand all the parts and context because they have enough lived life experience generally to understand the different scenarios you're running through to help them gain perspective or change their paradigm. A child, it's not that they don't have enough experience. I think every child has enough experience. It's that for myself, I've become so detached from the experience of my childhood that I don't know how to relate to that. If I was still a child, I probably would be able to relate, but because I'm not. So for you, when you're looking at, okay, how could I be a positive mechanism, positive influence leader to this child? Because you're never going to be her dad per se, right? She has, right. But like, what does that look like as far as transferring that discipleship to the next generation?
So first thing is it scared me to death when I thought about it. And then when I settled into it, was super excited about it. I'm even more excited now. Allie, that's my fiance, her daughter's name's Arlie. Allie and Arlie absolutely make me want to be a better man. And they want me to, what I found is my primary responsibilities, because I really evaluated this. Like, okay, what's my role here? And my role, and I firmly believe this, my role as a man is to direct, protect, and provide for this family, for the family unit that we're bringing together. And the direction part is, I list that first because that's the Jesus part. That's the, we're gonna pray before we have a meal, or we're gonna talk about Jesus, and we're gonna, here's this little kid Bible that I was able to get Arlie. And I'm seeing my faith, I'm seeing Christ himself through a different lens. And it's being around a child I've started to understand the scriptures that talk about childlike faith.
Mhm.
I'm like, this is pretty cool. But I do know that I take everything that I do, I understand that there's more weight to my actions than I used to believe that there was. People, because I've got people watching me, and I want to make sure that how I speak and my, my tone, and am I showing love even through correction? There's just so much that I'm learning about. I guess I'll say it this way. It was hard for me without a child in my life to really understand the fatherly love that I think Jesus wants us to feel. The Father loves us so much, he sent his only son. And I can read that and I can feel, yeah, that's pretty cool. And, thank you, God, for doing that. But when other people are relying on you and you have that protector's heart and that compassionate heart, and that it changes how you view that relationship. And I'm forever grateful that to have this new family unit is showing me that it's very, very cool, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to talk about that as far as Christ sending his son. So I'm the seventh of 11, and I struggled with learning my ABCs, reading like that. But when I was still learning my ABCs, my younger sister she already knew everything. And so there was a point in my childhood where my mom, and we grew up, again, very, what the right word is. It was just nuts. We grew up nuts, I think. My mom did not believe, whether it was due to religion or whatever it was that caused this belief to come into our family, but believed that the school system was of the devil. The government was up, like everybody was out to get us, and we were trying to avoid that. And so the thought of children being in a public school system that you believe is ran by the devil seems ludicrous to somebody who believes that that's like the devil teaching your children. Okay? So this is how I interpret it as a child. If you talk to her today, she may not fully agree with that definition.
She's like, come on, man, that's not true.
It wouldn't be that far off. I've talked to her a lot about it. But the point is, there was a point where I had this really learning my ABCs came with a little bit of abuse in my perspective. It was not a fun experience learning my ABCs. There's a lot of trauma around there. And for a long time, I used to pin my mom as this villain in my life, as the person who abused me, to teach me my ABCs. And that was my story that I told myself over and over and over, for not intentionally, like I want to have a bad opinion of my mom. It's just what I thought had happened. Yeah. As I got older and I more fully comprehended how much my mom didn't like the public school system, then this gave me more context. So it goes back to that phrase, there's only two types of people in the world, the ones you love and the ones you don't know. Well, I didn't know my mom that well. The more I got to know my mom and how much she didn't like the public school system, when she chose to really make certain that I knew my ABCs and could read, that school year, she took all of the children and she spent dedicated one-on-one time with me, which was more time than I wanted because I thought I was being abused, to teach me my ABCs. And I always looked at this as a super negative thing. And then as I got more context to what had happened, it's like, wow, Jesus was cool. I mean, God was cool for sacrificing one son. Abraham was cool for being willing to sacrifice one son. My mom was willing to give up all of her children to this institution she literally thought was the devil at the time to make sure that I could function in society. That puts a whole new perspective on all of the trauma I experienced. It wasn't great. I wouldn't want anybody to go through the trauma I experienced. Yeah. And the level of compassion and love that I have for my mom, being willing to make a choice like that, I wouldn't make a choice like, I don't know if I would. I would rather my kid be dumb and not learn how to read until they're 26 years old than send them to public school personally. So it's just crazy. Like, would you do that for one of your children? And then think of like what God did for all of his children and all that he accomplished. And then Christ being willing to do that, not just doing it because he was told to or forced to, but out of love as well. Yeah. So it's a fascinating thing to be able to have your mind expanded into that level of compassion and like, what would that look like?
It is. It's amazing. And at this stage of life too. So as I said, I'm 53 years old and I'm starting to experience things that I just never experienced. I'd never been around children, as weird as that sounds. And I'm so excited about life every day. And I didn't experience that for a lot of years. And even through a success, quote unquote, successful business and all those kinds of things, that stuff's all great. And those victories, but you've heard the cliches of, that money doesn't buy happiness. First off, I don't believe that's true. I think that money doesn't take problems away, but it creates different problems. But I will say that the victories are more empty than I would have thought they were before I achieved them, and that the real wins in life are different than I would have thought they would be. And now I'm experiencing, like, when I can visit with somebody and help them through a problem, or when you really see somebody come alive. I'll give you a great example. So I have a friend in my life, awesome man of God, in his 60s, and has been really, really heavy for decades of his life. And I kind of put my arm around this guy. I said, bro, I can help you. So I actually, another shameless plug. So I wrote a second book, and I call it Suck Cycle. And my Suck Cycle book was written because I was sick of seeing specifically Christian people, fat, incapable, unhealthy, sitting in church with overweight kids. I'm like, man, I can't stand by and watch this anymore. So I decided, I'm going to write a book. I'm going to write a program. So I wrote a 7-week program, 49-day program. And there's 7 things. It's all based around the number 7. It's a pretty cool story of how all that happened. But there's 7 non-negotiables, I call them, that people do every day. I wrote a 49-day devotional to go along with it. So every morning there's a devotional aspect, and there's some workouts, and there's some nutritional things, and these things that can take somebody and improve their faith and fitness. So I showed this program to this dude. I said, man, give this a try. I'll coach you through it. Let's do this thing. This guy finishes up this coming Saturday, will be his 49th day. And he's down 15 pounds, put muscle on his frame. He is walking with confidence. He's never felt this good in his life. His marriage is better. He's more compassionate and patient. His testimony is just on and on and on. That's the victory for me. And what have I really achieved in that? Nothing. He has. Helping somebody else achieve something, the light came on in my head. I'm like, okay, now I found something that's firing me up. The bigger paycheck never fired me up, but watching somebody else come alive, come on, man. Well, that's what it is. That's invaluable, dude.
I agree. And what's fascinating, this just came to me because it's been 4 or 5 months ago, I decided I was going to stop using the phrase or the word in any capacity of pride or proud. So like, I'm not proud of anybody, because my interpretation of the word, okay, the intonation that I see happen when I say, I'm so proud of you. Now, in colloquially,
ooh, tough one.
Anyways, that one's a tough one. But in society, we use that as like, hey, good job. I'm so proud of you.
Yeah.
But why do we always follow up, hey, good job. You're amazing. That's so great, with a self-indulgent declaration as if we had something to do with their success? I'm so proud. Like, what are you proud of? What about their success gives you pride? Because that's like robbing them of their accomplishment.
I also find that saying that, I find that it's condescending, that I'm condescending to them. Like, I'm automatically putting myself above them. Hey, just so you know, I'm proud of you. So you've earned something from me. And that's me putting myself above them. I don't like that feeling.
And when Christ was introduced by Heavenly Father, it's never, I'm proud of him. It's, here's my son.
He's well pleased, isn't he, brother?
In whom I'm well pleased.
Yeah.
That's a way better phrase. That's a phrase that just came to me in a second.
It's awesome.
Like, hey, you can be pleased in somebody.
Yeah.
I've started using the word or a longer explanation to actually accurately describe how I feel. So I normally will say something to the effect of, I'm so grateful that you allowed me to be part of your growth.
Yes.
So grateful that you allowed me part of this experience. You allowed me to witness your success. I'm grateful to just be here. I'm grateful you trusted me. I'm grateful you trust me. I'm grateful you took my advice.
That's the line right there. Because that's what's on my heart so much. I'm so grateful you trusted me.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Honored. Hey, I'm honored that you are crediting some of your success to me, because I'm honored by that. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I also want you to know that you did it. You're the one who did everything. I gave you this manual, or this 49-day thing, 7-week thing. I gave it to you. That's true. I created that. But guess what? I created it years ago and you didn't do it, which means it didn't matter until you did something. Until you did it, you performed, you grew, you became more like Christ. That's when anything I did had any effect. And in consequence, same thing as Christ. Christ did the atonement. He died on the cross. He was resurrected, regardless of whether we accept it. And as meaningful as that is, it means nothing if we don't accept it. And he can't force it to have meaning for us. It doesn't mean anything unless it's accepted. It's a meaningless act unless you decide it has meaning for you.
Yeah, I love how reciprocal it is. There's two sides to it. We have our part in it. And I love that part of faith. And I think a lot of people miss that. And that's another thing that I'm all about is Christian people, you have a part in this.
Mhm.
This isn't just, I'm just living in the grace. I'm just, it's the grace of Jesus. And, yes, that's very real. But you got to get moving. You got to do something too. If you're stuck out in the middle of the freaking ocean and you're in a boat and you've got a couple oars, what are you going to do? Paddle or pray? You better do both. Let's pray for the direction to paddle, bro. Pick them up. Let's get moving. And that's the message I want to give to people. And it's not earning, it's not striving to earn God's love. It's striving to get the most out of this existence that we're blessed to have. And I love the Apostle Paul's teachings, especially the one where he says that he wants to live a life worthy of imitating. We have an obligation as followers of Jesus Christ to live a life that other people will look at and say, what is it about Sam? Something different about that dude. I want to know what that is. They might see you speak and be like, this is a pretty good message and I have a legacy and all that kind of stuff, but there's just something about Sam. I want to know what that is. You know what that is the aroma of Christ on you, bro. And we need that. And we can't, what's funny is a lot of times, because I talk to a lot of people that aren't yet Christians, I always say, they're not non-believers. They're just on their way. They don't believe yet. They're kind of pre-believers. And they'll say, well, I don't like to go to church because it's full of hypocrites. And I said, hey, you know what? You're right. I go to church because I am a hypocrite. And they're like, what? I said, well, I'm not an active hypocrite, but I think we all have some hypocrisy in us. But I want to go to church because I might have those tendencies. And I want to go to, there's hypocrites at McDonald's. You go there. But what are we talking about? You're looking for a church with perfect people? We need to go there because we're sick, quote unquote. Mm-hmm. I talk to people oftentimes that will say, I got to get my crap together before I go to church. I don't want to. No. Come as you are, bro. That's like saying, I'm going to join the gym after I lose my first 15 pounds, or I'm going to go to my doctor once this cold clears up. Let's go now. What are we talking about? Seek the help now. Seek the forgiveness now. Well, I don't know. I'll make it right with that friend that I wronged after some time has passed and he can cool down. No, make it right now. Do the thing now. If it's a good idea in a month, it's a great idea today, isn't it? Let's go. We got to get moving, man. Yeah. And that's the stuff I'll go from, I get fired up and I have to make sure it doesn't cross over to the line of getting frustrated with people. Because I know I need to, because I can tend to be that way a little bit. But
I don't like a lot of things just because my perspective is not the same. As far as my communication style is not the same as Grant Cardone's. Not perspective. I think we agree on a lot of things, but my communication style is not the same. But one of the things that he says, I forget which book it is, but it's one of his closing books, but he says his persistency, he says, you can tell your customers this, hey, don't misinterpret my persistency or my passion as being pushy. I just really believe in what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Right. And sometimes you have to let people know, hey, I'm not trying to be pushy here. I'm not trying to close you. I'm not trying to sell you something. I don't care about the money side of this. But man, your life is going to be so much better once you get this. I just think of how much better your life will be once you've done X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
So please don't confuse my passion being pushy. It's not pushy. I'm just really passionate about what I'm doing. Yeah, and I think that sometimes we have to preface that or somehow help them be aware of that. So, well, hey, I'm curious, where does somebody go if they wanted to get your books and listen to or read your books? Where do they find those? Where's the best place to find your podcast? And if somebody wanted to be mentored or coached by you in some sort of way, where would they approach you? Like what avenue is the best to approach you on to make that happen?
So I appreciate that. The books are available locally. They're in some bookstores here in Omaha, but most people aren't in Omaha. So on Amazon, just search Jim Motz books, JIMMOTZ, and both of them will pop up. And I would appreciate any of that support. I think there's some real value. They're very different books, and I pick them both up. The first book, you'll get to know me a little bit. In the Suck Cycle program, you'll understand what motivates me to want to help other people. So my baby right now is I launched a community on School called Building and Becoming. And that's part of when you asked me what my definition of freedom was. It's the building and the becoming. And I want to help people build and become. So 2 days ago, we launched our school community. So if anyone wants to reach out to me, they can get me on Instagrams where I'm most active. I'm at Real Jim Moats. My podcast is called Ministry of Freedom Show with Jim Moats. We have the YouTube channel where all the episodes are, as do you, by the way. I love your channel. And we're on all the typical platforms as well for the podcast. And my email, people can email me at info@jimmoats.com. And we're super passionate. I'm super passionate about helping people. It's not just find Jesus, but optimize their lives. I want people to stop existing and start living. And I think that we do that best in community. I think a lot of people feel alone, and it's amazing the community that you feel when you have a togetherness with people online. This school community that we have, School, SKOOL, I love that application and that website. It allows us to have Zoom calls, communication, post trainings, prayer meetings. We do so many cool things on our channel, and it's bringing people together. And I think it's impacting lives. And I would love for people to reach out to me. Even if I'm not trying to sell you anything. Again, I'm passionate about what I do. I'd love for you to buy some books. I'd love for you to come on and be part of our school community. But if not, reach out to me. Send me a message on any of the platforms. I'll give you my personal cell number when you reach out to me. If you want to text or talk with me, let's go. There's lives that need to be impacted. God's got me in this position to do that. And I appreciate you talking to me and giving me the chance as well, Sam. Appreciate you, man.
Yeah, absolutely. This has been such a blessing. I'm so grateful for the new format of my podcast, just having real conversations a little bit longer. I used to do them in like 35, 45 minutes. And it was always stressed, like, I got to get all the stuff in. I feel like we're able to have just more energetic transfer. So it's been a lot better. Good. I'm excited for the new wave. And I'm excited just to have you be part of the Fuel Your Legacy community, but also join the Ministry of Freedom community. I love watching your Instagram with you and your partner on there talking about things. I think that so much in life is not just one-sided, and sometimes it's easier because scheduling and all those things to just be out in front, have one of you out in front, the other one back. I do that way right now, so I understand that. But I really feel like if we could manage to get both of us on all the time, it'd be so much better just in life. You know, because two perspectives, two lived experiences, and masculine and feminine energies really contribute a lot to society. So
absolutely, man.
Thank you so much. And do you have a website at all right now, or is it?
So my website's about 3 weeks away from being active. It's going to be jimmoats.com.
It'll be active by the time we post this. So
I'm hopefully that's the case. So yeah, go and check that out, and that'll be the landing page, and people can jump off and find all the stuff I'm doing that hopefully will help them out.
Fantastic. And the links are actually down below in the podcast or YouTube area. So you can always click on the links directly there, or you can just search it up on social media. But we appreciate you guys sticking with us, and we're grateful and excited for the next guest as well. So thank you so much, Jim, and have a wonderful holidays for you and your family.
Appreciate you too, bro. Thanks so much, man.